guys, welcome to Brackets. Today we're gonna pit the biggest supply chain attacks head to head. I am Danielle Aminov.
And I'm Merav. We're both from Wiz Threat Research. And today we're doing a bracket of the worst supply chain attacks from recent years.
We're gonna have 4 attacks, 2 matchups, and 1 winner.
Our contenders are XZ Utils, Singularity, Shai-Hulud, and Team PCP's campaigns. And the rules are simple. We're judging each incident on technical complexity, impact, novelty, and what we're calling responder pain.
Yeah, like how bad would this be to investigate, contain, and explain? In other words, what we went through while it happened.
Right, and we've definitely been through this. I mean, supply chain attacks continue to rise. It is still happening. And just one quick disclaimer before we get into it, we're not celebrating attackers. These incidents caused real harm, and the point of this bracket is to understand what made them dangerous so defenders can learn from them.
Yes, we're ranking the incidents, definitely not hyping the people behind them.
Yeah, so the first matchup, XZ Utils versus Singularity, and the second matchup, Shai-Hulud versus Team PCP. If you haven't heard of some of these yet, don't worry, you will by the end of this. Let's go!
I want to start with XZ because to me this attack makes you look at open source differently.
It's a big title.
Yeah, and it deserves one because if I had to describe XZ in one sentence, it would be like, this is this girl spending years becoming your best friend, supporting you when you need her most, and when you're in a really difficult place, and when you need her most, she actually stabs you in the back, and used that trust against everyone around you. Yes, so in this case, the attacker spent 2 years earning trust of a small open source project and then used that trust to backdoor SSH on potentially millions of Linux systems.
So not like a smash and grab, more like he's building the tension. It's a slow burn attack.
Yes, exactly. So this small open source project is XZ Utils. It is a compression tool. Most people do not think about it, which is kind of the problem. It is one of those boring, invisible dependencies that sits underneath a lot of Linux systems, and it just exists in the background doing its job.
One of those projects that everyone uses and no one really funds properly.
Yes, and that context matters because XZ was mainly maintained by a guy named Last Colin, who has been open about burnout and health issues. And around 2021, 2022, you can see the pressure starting to build in the project's issue tracker. And people were asking things like, why bugs are not getting fixed and why releases were taking so long.
And he's like the sole maintainer, so basically they're complaining about him.
Yeah. So it was kind of creating, a safe environment for the malware. And I think this is the part people forget about in this incident because the social engineering did not start with code. It started with the project being under-resourced and with the maintainer being pushed to accept help. And then a contributor called Gia10 shows up with helpful patches, normal fixes, like the useful work.
Okay, so it's like usual boring commits, nothing that you would suspect normally.
Yes. And about 2 years, Gia10 becomes more involved, takes more responsibility, and eventually gets maintainer level access. Yes. And once that trust is there, the actual backdoors start getting introduced through changes that look like routine maintenance. And when we looked at it, I mean, listen, this is not the kind of thing that screams malware, and especially if you're reviewing it quickly. And that trust is already there. The contributor has been submitting boring routine commits for a long time. You know how it works.
Okay, so the payload is hidden in the boring parts of the code.
Yes, exactly. And by the way, technically, it was not so simple. This wasn't just someone dropping a backdoor into a random project. The attacker understood exactly how XZ was being linked into certain Linux distros and managed to piggyback into the SSH authentication flow. And under some very specific conditions, a specially crafted SSH key could end up triggering code execution.
Oh, that is exactly where you don't want a backdoor to be.
Yeah. So in practice, you went from, okay, it's just a compression library to, wait, this can lead to remote code execution.
It's very dramatic, like very scary.
Yeah, I mean, this was really out there. As an attacker, you want to be successful, you've invested so much time, and you want to be quiet. You don't want to be out there, putting the backdoor in SSH necessarily. So, I mean, SSH is how people administer servers. It's the front door to a huge amount of infrastructure. And they didn't just plant the backdoor and hope no one would notice. Actually, while we were analyzing it, one thing that really stood out was how much effort went into avoiding detection. The malware behaved differently depending on the environment, avoiding certain analysis conditions, and they even interfered with OSS spots. Which is huge. That's level of planning, you don't see it very often.
Okay, and this detail is actually interesting because they didn't just focus on the attack itself, the payload, the malware. They also made sure to cut off the safety nets.
Yes.
So like if this was the girl that betrayed us earlier, she made sure that our girlfriends are not on our side in this, basically.
Exactly that.
And how did he get caught?
A very, very good question. So the whole thing gets caught because Andres Freund, a Microsoft engineer, sorry if I didn't pronounce your name correctly, they noticed that SSH logins are taking longer than expected during some performance testing. I mean, around a half second slower.
Oh, okay. So most people will blame that on the Wi-Fi and not like linger on that.
Yeah. So he did not. Instead, he started digging and eventually discovered the backdoor.
Okay, so the difference between this being just a small security incident and this being a catastrophic infection across every Linux system was some guy noticing half a second of a delay.
Yeah.
That's crazy. How did he even notice that? I mean,
this is sus, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, some people online have questioned it as well. You're running performance tests, see a tiny delay, no human eye can perceive that, and you take it too personally to going to check commits.
Crazy.
I mean, I'm not saying it was an anonymous protomail with check XZ LOL, but I'm also not saying that. Anyways, he found it, reported it, and saved us from catastrophe.
And we still don't know who this Gia-Tan is.
No. The account looked mission built, created years earlier, focused heavily on XZ, activity patterns that did not look like a normal hobby maintainer. Some researchers have compared parts of the tradecraft to state-backed operation.
Oh.
Yeah, but attribution is still not settled.
Oh, I see. So the point of this whole thing is not this is a specific group that did this, but it really just exposed our trust relationship with these projects and how it can be exploited and abused.
Yes. So XZ is not scary only because of the code. It is scary because of the path to the code, a critical dependency maintained by very few people. The social pressure, suddenly a super helpful contributor gains trust, the backdoor, then a backdoor in SSH, something you would never expect.
Yeah, it's SSH.
Yeah. And if I'm making the bracket case for XZ, it is this. It attacks the trust model itself. It makes you ask not just, is this package safe, but how did this person become trusted? And what support did the project have before it happened?
And how many XZ Util-like attacks are still out there undiscovered? Okay, so we heard the XZ Utils case, and now we have our contender, Singularity. I'm gonna make the case for them. Not that I'm taking their side in any way. Have to clarify that. So if XZ was the quiet trust story, Singularity is almost the opposite. It was loud, it was messy, it was very much for the modern developer environment. It involved NPM, GitHub actions, repo exposure, and abuse of local AI tools.
Sounds like a cyber attack with too many browser tabs open.
And I think the most important thing with Singularity is that it was an attack of firsts. Not because every part worked perfectly, but because defenders suddenly had to deal with a few new problems at the same time. A regular package install became the execution point. GitHub became the place where stolen data was dumped publicly, and local AI tools became part of the attack surface. So the attack targeted at first NX, a popular JavaScript build system. From the victim's environment, it looked completely normal. You install a package, the package has a post-install script, then the script runs, and suddenly your machine is part of the incident.
npm install as a trustful.
So the malware looked for high-value developer secrets, GitHub tokens, npm tokens, SSH keys, wallets, and files, basically the things you really don't want to end up leaked. But the first novel part was where some of that data ended up. See, it was not only sent to the attacker-controlled infrastructure, a C2 server or such. The malware also created public GitHub repositories inside the victim's own account and then dumped the data there. The repository was named Singularity repository, so they weren't very secret about it.
So from the outside, it can look like the victims, like their own secrets?
Exactly. And that creates a very specific incident response issue. I mean, you're not just asking what was stolen, you're also asking, was it public? Who cloned it? Did anyone see it? Are the tokens still valid? I mean, once these secrets are public, you don't really get to put them back in. You can delete the repository or rotate the tokens and clean the machine, but you still have to assume the exposed data was seen.
And public for a few hours is still public.
Yeah, I mean, public on the internet for a few hours is public forever. And that public dumping mattered because the later activity used those stolen GitHub tokens to expose private repositories. So this was not just like a weird exfiltration method, it created real follow-on risk. And the root cause was also familiar to us. It was unsafe GitHub Actions usage. This is not new to anyone, but this was used specifically with pull request target. So the workflow handled attacker-controlled pull request titles without properly sanitizing them. And because pull request targets operates with elevated permissions, that gave the attacker a path to execute code and access a powerful GitHub token.
So the pull request title became the weapon.
Basically, yeah. And that sounds kind of strange, but it's a real CI/CD foot gun. I mean, pull request target is not evil by itself. It's very useful. But the problem is when you combine untrusted input with elevated permissions, then your automation becomes part of the attack path. And then there's the second part, which I personally kind of like, not to give them any credit. But it's the AI angle. I mean, AI is everywhere. Of course, it would be here. So the malware checked if any local AI CLI tools were installed. So if you have Claude Code, for example, you're in this. And try to use those tools to help search for sensitive files.
So it asked the victim's own AI tools to search the victim's machine.
Yeah, and that is genuinely interesting for defenders. I mean, the malware was not only scanning the file system directly, it was checking whether the developer already had a local powerful assistant, I mean, such as Gemini, Claude, whatnot, and then try to make that assistant help with discovery, turn it against them, basically. And it used risky flags with funny names like dangerously skip permissions and YOLO and trust all tools, and then just prompted the tools to look for wallets, keys, configs, everything you can think of, basically.
The flag was literally YOLO.
Yeah, it was YOLO. I mean, it's ridiculous.
We cooked.
Yeah, a little bit. But the takeaway is not AI made this unstoppable, AI. It's that developer AI tools are now part of the local environment, and attackers are going to try and abuse them. That was new, and defenders had to learn quickly what that means. Where are these tools installed? What kind of guardrails do they have? What can they read? What can they log? Can they detect if malware is using them?
So the AI part is not just a headline.
Yeah, it's not. It's a significant thing for defenders and for the attacker, and I think that's why it should be in this bracket. I mean, it was not the cleanest, it was not the smoothest, it was not the secretest, it wasn't perfect at all, but it forced defenders to handle a combination of things that felt new. I mean, there was package compromise, and there was GitHub action abuse, and of course there was the usage of the local AI tooling in addition to data dumping in GitHub repositories. So that is why it mattered, not because it was perfect, but because it expanded the playbook that defenders had to be ready for.
So it is really about novelty.
Yeah, exactly. So we're here at the verdict of the first bracket, XZ Utils versus Singularity. I will once again make the case for Singularity, though they are not my friends.
Go ahead.
The major thing, it actually happened at scale. It leaked secrets, exposed repositories, abused GitHub actions, and introduced the AI-assisted malware angle. So that is a major warning sign for where supply chain attacks are heading.
Fair. Singularity is important because it shows where attacker experimentation is going.
Right. I mean, it's not theoretical. People had to respond. We had to respond together with our customers. I mean, companies had to rotate credentials, clean up public repos, and figure out whether their developer tools were involved.
I agree with all of that,
Yeah.
but I still give the matchup to XZ.
Okay, rude, but explain.
So Singularity was noisy, created visible damage, which is bad, but also means people noticed.
Yeah.
And XZ was designed to disappear into normal open source maintenance. It was patient, quiet, and aimed at a critical access path across Linux systems.
Okay, so your argument is the attack that almost happened was worse than the one that actually happened?
For this matchup, yes.
Okay, explain.
Singularity makes you question GitHub actions, tokens, and AI tools. And XZ makes you question the trust model underneath open source.
Okay.
And kind of ask yourself really hard questions. I remember us, scratching our heads over it. It is genuinely scary.
Yeah, I hate that that's true. So I guess that
XZ
takes it.
Yeah. So, second matchup.
Yes.
It's going to be Shai-Hulud versus Team PCP's campaigns.
Yes, let's go.
Yes. So, I'll move on with Shai-Hulud, which I think is one of a kind. If I had to describe Shai-Hulud in one sentence, it was the first self-propagating NPM worm. And this is the proof that dependency chains can become infection chains.
That's a very bad sentence for anyone running CI.
Very bad. And it is connected to Singularity in an important way. Singularity stole lots of GitHub and NPM related credentials. And after that, access like that used to publish malicious versions of legitimate NPM packages. We don't know for sure whether it was the same attacker or someone who got access to these stolen tokens, but Shai-Hulud clearly walked through a door that incidents like Singularity opened.
So Singularity is the breaking and Shai-Hulud was the one who walked through it.
Exactly. And the name comes from Dune. Shai-Hulud is the giant sandworm. They must be fans of Timothée Chalamet.
Timothée, yeah.
And the attacker used public GitHub repositories with that name to dump stolen secrets. And the branding is memorable, but the important part is the propagation model.
Please explain self-propagation for us.
Okay, you ready?
Yes, let's go.
Okay. So you start with installing an infected NPM package. And during install, the malicious script runs. And it steals your NPM token. Then it uses your NPM token to publish infected versions of packages that you maintain. And then your users install those packages and the same thing happens to them.
Okay.
Yeah, so their tokens are stolen, the packages are infected, and the chain keeps going.
So every victim can become a distributor.
Yes. And that is the difference between normal package compromise and a worm behavior. It is not just stealing from one victim. It is using that victim's trust relationships to spread.
Okay, and while it's spreading, it's of course collecting secrets. Yeah.
It harvested secrets using Trafolog, which we all know. It's a legitimate secret scanning tool. And then instead of sending everything quietly to private infrastructure, it dumped stolen data into public GitHub repositories.
So like Singularity again, it also cloned private repositories and republished them publicly. So they are creating public exposure that other people can also abuse, except for the actors themselves.
Yes. And one detail that captures how messy this was, part of the exfiltration infrastructure used free tier service and eventually hit a callback limit.
No, so they built a self-propagating NPM worm, but they still got rate limited.
Yeah, the malware scaled better than the budget.
That is unfortunately relatable for me.
Yeah, then there was a second wave. The second coming, literally the repo name was, the repo description, I think, was Shai-Hulud the second coming.
Of course it was.
This time it has upgraded behavior and it moved earlier in the install lifecycle, bundled cloud SDKs from AWS, Azure, and GCP, and looked for cloud credentials like more directly.
Okay, so version 1 was more of like grabbing whatever it can find, while version 2 came with like a proper shopping list.
Exactly. It could create GitHub Actions workflow that registered a victim machine as a self-hosted runner named Shai-Hulud. That means GitHub itself becomes part of the control path. And if the attacker can trigger workflows later, they may be able to run code again on that machine.
So GitHub becomes the remote control instead of a C2.
Yes, yes. And there was also a cross-victim exfiltration. The malware could steal data from victim A, but publish it under victim B's GitHub account. I mean, really nasty business.
Sneaky.
Yeah, that makes investigations much harder because the account hosting the data is not necessarily the victim that the data came from.
So everyone looks innocent and guilty at the same time.
Yes. That's very painful for responders because you have to answer like, whose data is this? Was your data published elsewhere? And if so, where and what?
And the answer is usually not as simple as you think.
Yes. And I think the long tail is a big part of the story. And even after the public warnings came out, private registries could still be serving cached or poisoned packages. And developer tools and browser extensions could continue spreading the infection until clean versions were released. There was even a multi-million-dollar theft linked to a Trust Wallet compromise where credentials exposed through this campaign were reportedly used in a malicious browser extension update.
Crazy.
Yes. So even though the worm itself was chaotic, the credentials it exposed create opportunities for follow-on attacks long after the initial incident.
So this is the really important part because just like in Singularity, a public secret dump does not end.
What are you so obsessed with Singularity?
And it's the same thing. It's the same thing. The public repo dump. That's the same thing. Sorry, Jesus.
Okay.
Shai-Hulud, okay.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. But, okay, let's wrap up. So if I'm making the bracket case for Shai-Hulud, it is this. Before Shai-Hulud, an NPM worm was mostly like a scary idea.
Yeah.
And after that, it was a working model. And it proved that stolen maintainer tokens can turn dependency chains into infection chains. And once that model exists, other actors can borrow from it.
Or, burrow in it. Like a sand for... I never read June. I don't know.
Yeah. I guess this is true.
Okay. That was Shai-Hulud. And now to the next supply chain in this bracket, the Team PCP campaigns. Jesus. Wow. Team PCP. What can be said about Team PCP that has not been said before? So, I think this one is interesting because it is like pretty much entirely different from... That's a lie. It is different than the ones we spoke about before. I mean, it was more established than Singularity. It was not a two-off situation like with Shai-Hulud, and it's the complete opposite of XZ. I mean, I think Singularity and Shai-Hulud were also very different from that. But yeah, Team PCP continued with that vibe. I mean, they were loud, they were dramatic. And every few weeks, there was another wave, another campaign, another iteration of their malware, another compromised package. I mean, they wanted people to notice and they wanted to wreak havoc.
Sounds like a pick-me behavior.
Yes, the full-on pick-me. I mean, to be clear, that does not make them impressive in any good way. It makes them disruptive, attention-seeking, and harmful. And to me, that's not cool. The first major Team PCP wave was with Trevi, and then quickly after it was Kix and LightLM and Telnix, just a bunch of other open source projects. And the payloads were actually capable. I mean, they harvested GitHub Action secrets, cloud credentials, whatnot. In some cases, they even scraped secrets directly from GitHub Actions runner memory, and instead of just looking for files on disk.
So this is a pretty big step from grab just .env file.
Yeah, exactly. They're a step up from the rest. On the technical side, they do seem to know what they're doing. I mean, what made Team PCP different was not one single technique, it was how quickly they iterated. Every campaign looked a little different, but the formula stayed the same. So you have Compromise a trusted package, steal a maintainer of CI/CD credentials, and then use those credentials to compromise the next project. And repeat, the cycle continues. And then they started borrowing ideas from other campaigns. Shai-Hulud, for an example, with mini Shai-Hulud. Despite the name, it was not the original Shai-Hulud worm, so not exactly the same malware. It was Team PCP taking that playbook of credential theft, GitHub-based exfiltration, and propagation, and adapting it to their own tooling.
So not the original worm, more like someone picked up the idea and made their own version.
Right, and that distinction matters. Shai-Hulud proved the model. Team PCP kept operationalizing and remixing that model. Later, they moved on to another campaign, Miasma. Different branding, same overall strategy. Instead of Dune references, suddenly everything was Greek mythology. As someone who has not read or watched Dune, but loves Greek mythology, that was more up my alley.
Perfect.
The malware changed, but underneath it was clearly the next evolution of the same campaign style. They also kept improving the payloads. Miasma, for example, generated a uniquely encrypted payload for every infection, so that makes traditional hash-based detection much less useful. Earlier versions could be tracked more easily by hash, but here, every infection looked different, and that was a clear evolution.
So every release was basically same idea, new features.
Pretty much, and I think this is the real Team PCP story. Not that every individual attack was revolutionary, most were not. It is that they treated supply chain almost like a product, like a factory. Version after version, each campaign added something. Memory scraping, cloud-specific, credential collection, different exfiltration channels, better evasion. They just kept adapting whenever defenders caught up. They were not trying to stay hidden forever like XZ. They were not stealthy. They didn't want to be. They seemed to enjoy the attention. They left signatures, they reused their themes, Dune, Greek mythology. They publicly named their tooling, and they created artifacts that made attribution easier for researchers than it needed to be. So it seems like they wanted researchers following the campaign, which sounds fun for us. But you have to remember the constant iteration was actually causing real damage.
So XZ was one carefully planned operation, and Team PCP was a weekly release schedule.
Yeah, basically. And that is why they're in this bracket. Not because they were the most stealthy group, not because they invented the NPM worm, and not because we want to give them credit. We obviously do not. They are here because they showed how quickly supply chain attacks can evolve when someone keeps refining the same playbook over and over again. And that's my case. One of them.
So, for the verdict.
For the verdict of our second bracket.
Yes. Shai-Hulud is the historical turning point.
Mm-hmm.
The first NPM worm, huge blast radius, long trail, and a model that other actors could learn from.
Mm-hmm.
And that is hard to beat.
Totally. But Team PCP is what happens when the idea becomes repeatable.
Depressing, but accurate.
So you're with me. Shai-Hulud proved the war model for sure. Team PCP kept operationalizing supply chain compromise. So Shai-Hulud walked so Team PCP could run.
Okay.
I mean, they hit trusted tools, AI-related tools, cloud-heavy packages. They validated stolen keys and moved into environments. They added new techniques every wave, basically like malware release notes.
So Shai-Hulud is innovation, and Team PCP was about operationalizing it.
Yeah, so I think Team PCP takes this round.
I get it. Shai-Hulud changed the game. Team PCP keeps showing up in the game.
Exactly. Team PCP moves to the final. Pew, 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 pew. The final round. Wow. It was hard to choose between Team PCP and Shai-Hulud, but I think we have it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're ready to choose between Team PCP and XZ Utils. I'll make the Team PCP case first.
Go for it.
So XZ is serious. You're speaking about it. It's big. It's stealthy. It could have been catastrophic. But Team PCP is happening, maybe right now by the time this is live, in the real world again and again and again. They keep adapting. They are not just one backdoor. They are an operating supply chain factory.
It is cheap.
I mean, I guess. But they hit tools people trust. They steal credentials, they steal secrets, they set up resistance, and sadly, they are successful.
So your argument is impact and success.
I mean, right, what else do you need? XZ was almost catastrophic, I'll give you that, but Team PCP is already creating real cleanup work for defenders and responders, and it keeps forcing us to adapt to it. Did we rotate enough? Did we check the right runners? Did the stolen token touch something else? That's a lot of responder pain.
Strong, but I still think XZ has the highest risk factor.
Okay, because it's potential?
Yes, of course. And because of that trust model,
Okay.
Team PCP is active and harmful, but it also produces signals. And there are public repos, noisy payloads, reused themes. It is like PR for a new movie coming out. And this is bad, yes, but it gives defenders something to chase, something obvious to chase. And XZ was designed to disappear into normal open source maintenance. And I mean, think about it, a backdoor in one of the most sensitive access paths on Linux systems.
So the quieter attack beats the louder attack.
For me, yes. Team PCP is the worst ongoing campaign. XZ is the worst potential disaster. And if we're crowning the incident that should keep the industry thinking longest, I think it is XZ. It forces the uncomfortable questions. How many critical projects are one burned out maintainer away from accepting the wrong commits?
That is brutal, honestly.
It is. And it is bigger than one package. XZ makes you think about open source sustainability and maintainer burnout, trust, build systems, release artifacts, what we test, what we do not test, and how much of the internet depends on things most people never look at. If they are compromised, the consequences can be catastrophic.
I can live with that. Team PCP is the worst active campaign. XZ is the highest risk incident. And honestly, I also don't want to give Team PCP the spotlight for this. So I don't actually want them to win. They seem to be after the attention as much as impact. So truly sophisticated attackers wouldn't really want that. And I think we can give this one to XZ.
And just to be clear, we're certainly not celebrating or encouraging this or any other malicious activity.
Of course not.
Okay, so we crown XZ.
Yes, we crown XZ. Yay.
Okay, so thanks for joining us.
In today's brackets, we had our first battle of Singularity versus XZ Utils, from which XZ Utils won, followed by Team PCP versus Shai-Hulud, from which Team PCP won. And our big final was between XZ Utils and Team PCP, from which XZ Utils was crowned the worst software supply chain attack of recent years.
The worst trophy ever.
Worst trophy ever. Thank you for joining us. If you want to hear more from us, check out Wiz's blog. And yeah, thank you for watching Brackets.